A congressman from Wisconsin, his name is Reed Ribble. Some of the guys that work here and also live in Wisconsin got us in contact with him. I'm hoping he might be able to come at the end of December and give us a report on the vote on the balanced budget amendment. How many people are aware of the balanced budget amendment? That's going to be voted on.
Well, there's no amendment yet.
Well, not yet, but basically there's going to be a vote. And what happened, the 2nd of August was the D-Day when everything's going to fall apart if we don't raise the debt ceiling. And there's this negotiation. One of the outcomes was that they would guarantee there would be a vote on a balanced budget amendment. So we've been in touch with a guy named Alan Parks, Americans for Balanced Budget Amendment, and others that are working with those in Washington to help with the wording on that. We linked Sheila Weinberg. The amendment isn't written right, it doesn't have any teeth, and it's just smoke and mirrors. And so when you really see what's really happening, it's kind of, it makes your blood run cold. And even with Lowell's presentation here, he's doing it very graciously, but if you're reading between the lines, our blood ought to be running a little bit cold here in Hawaii too. And the question is, how do you take that awareness and convert it into productive activity? And the key is, where are you going? What's the goal? You know, this thing, well, we made big mistakes. You know, oh no, we made a mistake. You only have to be right 3% of the time if you're continuously feeding back into the loop. And you'll land on the moon, right? So what that, for me, did was gave me a lot of liberty to, we don't have to be perfect. We don't have to, quote, get it right. We have to have the feedback systems that are telling us, you're off a little bit here, and then listen to them. Now we got a feedback system over here. A man that understands the trajectory, right? And right now the trajectory is into financial bankruptcy and the collapse of the country and the collapse of the state. That sounds melodramatic. But if you listen to Sheila Weinberg, she says our national debt is not $15 trillion. It's $75 trillion. That's $500,000 per family. And our state debt is probably not just 8 point or 14 point billion. It's probably, if you count all these other things. And so what are we leaving our kids? You know, we go into our retirement and have our high 3 and be the takers and leave this huge thing that is unsustainable. Now that's a national theme, but it's also a Hawaii theme. On the other hand, instead of just being overwhelmed, what can I do? You do the continuous feedback loop. You come to a meeting like this, and you go, well, if we only have 25 people in Kona that are concerned or whatever, well, thank God we've got 25 people that are concerned. And we listen to someone who understands what that trajectory needs to be. And you start to think about how do you make the adjustment, take the feedback. And that's what's not happening. And I think part of the feedback, from my point of view at least, is instead of being takers, hey, here's how you work the state system to get the high 3 to do all that stuff. We got to change the mindset. And that was the theme that we had on this, catalyzing a sea change. Not just a change, a sea change, a wholesale change in how you think about things. About economics. And that's what I think Lowell's helping us do. And instead of blaming the guy over there or whatever, they say, look, what can I do? How can I be empowered so I can do my own little thing? That's what this meeting's about, really. Is, you know, we might not have much, we don't have enough money to pay for the airfare or whatever. We're going to start with what we got, and we're going to start working with it. And so I'm just delighted to have Lowell come back and tell us the next phase about how this last legislative session got us back on track, or it's got us so far off we don't know what to do.
If I can interrupt for 1 minute.
Yes.
For those of you who would like to help us maintain a balanced budget,
yeah. And that's our secretary. So I didn't make the direct appeal, but you can help us, and if we get over 800, that'll help us get for the next one.
Really good. You know, one of the things for those of you who watched the video clip with Malia's, and then maybe you can fall asleep now. I want to go over some of the things that the legislature did and why some of those actions really are indicative of where we are right now. And that is, most of the, can I say it? Would you excuse me? We got screwed last year, last session. And you didn't know it. Because everything that the legislature did, you won't be aware of currently or if you are, probably not until next year. So a lot of the changes that they made to tax laws probably be so subtle that you won't notice it. And one of the big ones that they counted on was the suspension, what they call the suspension of certain general excise tax exemptions. And they portrayed it as, you know, these guys are getting a break anyway, they don't deserve it, and we need the money, and therefore, you know, for only 2 years, we're going to suspend these exemptions. Well, I'm sorry. That action will hurt every single one of us in this room tonight. One of the worst ones is they will suspend the exemption for stevedoring activities. And if you're not a stevedore, maybe I need to explain. It's the loading and unloading of ships and airplanes at our state's docks and airports. And as you know, nearly everything that we consume in our household comes over that dock, comes through Hilo and Kona Airport. And the people who lift that cargo off the plane or off the dock, off the ship at the dock, are stevedores. And the charge for those services up until this July 1st were exempt from the 4% general excise tax. Tax will now be imposed for 2 years on those activities. Now, you're going, it's got to be inconsequential. It's not really that much, is it? Well, you know, we enacted that back in 1979 initially, when there was a case in Washington called American Can in the Container Corp. When we realized, you know what, everything does come over those docks. Everything does get loaded and unloaded. And every time you add that 4%, it's going to increase the cost. Now just think of your last trip to the grocery store, and you looked at that box of crackers or Triscuit or the bag of potatoes or whatever. Isn't the price a little bit higher than it was last year?
A lot higher.
Or a lot higher. Well, that's due to the fact that it's now being taxed because it got unloaded by a stevedore whose charges are now subject to the 4% tax. The same thing, I know that Dave isn't somewhat related, for those of you who are in construction. We had a deduction for amounts paid by a general contractor to a subcontractor that was split between the two. So the contractor paid only what he kept from his client, and what he paid over to the subcontractor was exempt to the general contractor, but was subject to the 4% to the subcontractor. Now, when the client pays the general, the entire amount that the general receives, including the amount that the subcontractor, is subject to 4%. And when that amount that is paid to the subcontractor is paid, the subcontractor now has to pay 4%. So the amount that is paid over the subcontractor has actually been taxed twice at the 4% rate. Now, don't you think, I would think, that's going to raise the costs of construction, period. You know, it just is amazing that lawmakers thought they could get away with it. They thought nobody's going to notice because my constituents don't pay that tax. It's hidden somewhere in the background. And yet we're all paying for it, the higher cost of living and doing business. So somebody over here said, no, maybe we should do something about attracting businesses to do business in Hawaii. Not when you have a legislature that is so focused on taking care of business by raising taxes on businesses. Why would you ever want to locate in Hawaii? And I'll tell you, you know, a lot of people, and I don't know if I have any disciples here in the crowd this evening, we were very, very critical of what was called the Act 221 high technology tax credits. The most generous tax credits in the nation. 100%. Where do you invest money in something where you get all your money back? Guaranteed. 100% of every dollar that you invest in a high-tech company, you get back through a tax credit. Now, I put money in Microsoft. I don't expect to get all my money back. Maybe, yes, if the stock goes up, I'll get more money back. But if it goes down, hey, I'm taking a risk. There was no risk in Act 221. Absolutely nothing. So yes, it made a lot of sense to invest in an Act 221 company because you not only got your money back, but if the stock appreciated or the business paid out, you got more than the 100% back because the stock increased or the investment increased. And yet every single one of us paid for it. Every single one. And when Dave and I were coming down from, and we just talked about it, coming down from the airport, we talked about the fact that at one time, yeah, the plantations ruled, so to speak. But in the waning years of the sugar and pineapple industry, the industry would come to the legislature and ask for some help to maintain the research which kept them in business. In the last couple of years, they asked for $1 million. $1 million. And it got to the point where these legislators were so cynical. They said, well, yeah, we'll give you $1 million, but you got to match it with $1 million. Ladies and gentlemen, we will have given away over $1.3 billion. That's what we know of. We don't know of what's still out there. $1.3 billion in the Act 221 credits. Now, it'd be nice that we knew that the $1.3 billion grew the technology industry, created jobs, in fact, produced more businesses here in Hawaii. But we have no knowledge of that. In fact, there's a lot of cynicism that the jobs that were created under 221 have already disappeared because those companies that created those jobs decided without the subsidies, they had to move someplace else, like Idaho. So we started up the companies, but then they moved out of state and took the jobs with them. Now, $1.3 billion versus $1 million for sugar. What were these guys thinking of? And now we regret it and find out there are consequences for not having done more to keep at least part of the industry, the sugar and the pineapple industry, alive. And one of them is right in your back door, backyard, right up here, Hamakua Ditch. We no longer have the sugar companies to beat up on, but we also no longer have them to take care of the irrigation ditches, not only here in Hamakua, in Maui, in Kauai, all of the whole issue about the Kolohu Dam in Kauai. That was all maintained by the sugar industry and the sugar plantations. So we traded off, and yet we created even more problems as a result of not being more business friendly to this particular industry, which has been here with us for over 100 years. If that's any indicator about how friendly we are to business, it's scary. It's scary because why would any business, short of the fact that you can go skiing in the morning and swimming in the afternoon, why would any business want to locate in Hawaii? With a tax system that is onerous. Well, the other thing that I think we have to remember from Act 221, high technology, the sexy kid on the block, was they were going to create high-paying jobs. 6 figures, guys. This is the kind of jobs we want for our kids. And yet, they cowered when I pointed out, and so our maximum tax rate kicks in at 5 figures. Our maximum tax rate. I heard somebody from Illinois here. What was their top income tax rate? 3%?
Yeah.
Our top tax rate until a couple of years ago, 8.25%. Kicked in at $96,000 for a couple. So what happens to people who have high-paying, high-tech jobs? Why would they want to come here when they could work in Illinois and pay 3%?
Texas and pay nothing.
And pay nothing if you're in Texas and,
Leaving Illinois, going to Texas.
Right. And so you sit there and go, are these guys have any kind of noggin screwed on the top of their neck? They're not thinking. And so even more so, a couple of years ago, because we were in the budget crunch, they raised the top tax rate to 11%. Even better. Challenging California, This year they took,
Hank, sorry to interrupt.
I'm just curious, you seem to have the opportunity to work with the legislature. Can you just fill us in a little bit on how you do that and you know, when you want to share this kind of information with them, how they respond?
Black floors?
You know, I don't have the satchel, the black satchel. Does everybody understand that one?
Yeah.
You know, we don't lobby. We are there to inform and educate. However, because I can't remember the last time I said I'm wrong. So when we say, you know, you really don't think that's a great idea, they kind of look at you and they go, oh, no. We'll make that decision at 1 o'clock in the morning. They know
When
they're
you're
wrong.
gone.
They know they're wrong. But because of the politics and because of the pressure to balance the budget, they go ahead and do it despite what we have to say. Okay? I mean, I don't know if I don't know of many people, but I know that we do have, for some of my organizations, silent auctions. We auction off hotel packages that we get as gifts from the hotels. As a result of legislation this past session, there will now be a minimum hotel room tax of $10 per night, even though it's a complimentary room that I want in a silent auction fundraiser. So when I go and use that room, it's going to be $10 for a hotel room tax. I sat there and you go, boys, girls, do you understand the TAT? The TAT philosophically says it's a tax on gross income. It's a tax of X percentage, 7.25, it's now 9.25 for the next year and a half or so, times gross income. Well, my 4th grade teachers told me 0 times anything is still 0. I don't know how they got that interpretation. I talked to the tax department after the bill was passed, and the tax department says, "You got a point there." And I go, "Yeah, you want to meet my 4th grade teacher? I mean, and she may be dead by now, but she can tell you 0 times any number is still 0." And yet they passed that this last session. Another change that will impose additional taxes on people, regardless of the fact that, you know, the hotel outrigger or whoever was really great, gracious enough to give us this free room. Another one that they passed is to eliminate your ability to deduct your state income tax on Schedule A. Okay? And that was always a benefit to us because we have such high state income tax. This is a significant amount of money. The other one is that if you make over, as a single person, 100, as a head of household, 150, and as a couple, more than $200,000 of adjusted gross income, we're going to limit the amount that you can deduct. So if you're over 100,000 as an individual, you can only have itemized deductions up to 25,000. For the couple at 200,000, they only can deduct up to 50,000. And it sounds like, okay, it's all those darn rich people. But if you'll recall, the federal government did something very similar recently, and they let it expire because they realized it wasn't hurting the rich people. It was hurting the people who benefited from those deductions. All of the charities that got these huge checks from rich people suddenly saw those contributions disappear. I mean, it's about the same logic as, remember, during the early 1990s, those nasty people who owned those yachts up in Rhode Island and wherever, we're going to slap a luxury tax on them because they're just rich and they don't deserve to have those toys. Well, yeah, they got rid of their toys, but the people they hurt was the guy who sanded the teak decks. Now he's out of a job. Now he's on unemployment. Now he's a liability rather than an asset. So, well-intended as they may be, when you have legislators with no experience, you've got real problems. And that comment about having professional legislators is indeed real. You have people who have graduated from law school, and they have this awakening, if you will, the next day, that I'm going to save the world. I have no experience, but now I have a law degree. I'm going to write laws. They write laws that make absolutely no sense. So where we really have to push back, I think, is to ask candidates as they run for office, and I realize we have a candidate here, is what kind of experience do you really have? It is a real change from when I first came to the legislature, it's almost 30 some odd years ago, where we had business people. Well, some of them were insurance salesmen, some of them were realtors, but they had experience. They knew what it was like to beat the pavements, to know that they had to work hard to earn a paycheck. We've got legislators who wouldn't even think of flipping hamburgers at the local McDonald's, or who says, well, you know, I'm self-sufficient. I'm living with my parents. And I'm going, okay, so do they charge you rent? But, you know, you've got people in there, ladies and gentlemen, you would absolutely pull your hair out because they have no life experience at all. They are out of a law school. Yeah, they're working for some law firm because they're a legislator. What experience do they have running a business? What experience do they have dealing with the regulatory atmosphere of both city and state? And I have my stories, my horror stories this year. Not begin to believe, well, yeah, I'm installing a battery and I'm putting a fence around it, and because I don't want people to vandalize it. It's going to be powered through photovoltaic. The city tells me, you have to landscape the area in behind the fence. I go, wait. It's a fence that's going to block the view. Nobody's going to see beyond the fence because the battery's in there and I don't want anybody to see the battery. And you want me to landscape it? What for? Nobody's going to see it. And if I landscape it, and the architect tells me, oh, it's the same price. You landscape it, you put gravel, it's the same price. I go, no, Carol. She's the architect. No, Carol. Put gravel down, close gate, never see it again. Put grass in, water it, you have to cut it. That's a continual maintenance cost. So even sometimes in private sector, I have my challenges with them. You know, they're inane examples of the regulatory atmosphere. And we talked about this at the national level. This is what companies nationwide, and I've sat with a couple of them in roundtables, they're afraid that government's going to come in and tell them how to run their businesses. And when government starts telling a private business how to run their business, that business is sure to fail.
Yes.
Sure to fail because government doesn't know what it's like to run a business. You know, so one of the things you could proactively start doing, 2012 is right around the corner, is, and I'm not saying partisan or not, I don't care what party you belong, you need to ask your candidates, what kind of experience do they bring to the table? Now Dave talked about givers and takers. One of the things, and I just dealt with the Department of Human Services on this issue, in a collaboration, and collaborations are almost intrinsic, if you will, part of success is because people have to realize that no one person has all the talent. I need every single one of you because you all bring something to the table. You all have something to contribute. That's what a collaboration is all about. Government does not collaborate. I am talking to these people at the Department of Human Services, and they can't understand. Well, what if somebody pulls out? Well, they'll never be part of this partnership again. Well, they have to give notice. Well, give notice. This is a one-year contract, memorandum of agreement. Government doesn't know how to collaborate. Government only knows that they're the ones that are handing out, and you should be grateful for it. You should be grateful that I'm giving you something. Doesn't matter that I'm taking all of your taxes and all of your money, but you ought to be grateful for what I give you. Collaboration is the key to building community. And yet government is unwilling to come to the table with whatever it has. And so what you have to do is to ensure that the candidates that hold office, that make decisions for your life. And I sometimes sit in my office, and it's not up high, but I still kind of have this view of the street down below. I go, do these people recognize that everything they do, from crossing that street to buying a hamburger, is regulated by government? So you have to ask your candidate this coming election season, do you understand what it's like to do business in this state? Do you do the grocery shopping, or do you let your spouse or mom do it, or whatever? Do you really go in the store and look? You know, one of the things I do whenever I go to a foreign community, not my home community, I hit the grocery store. I hit the grocery store because it tells me so much about the people that live there. Not only what they eat, what their habits are, you know, what they're familiar with. It's the experience of knowing what the day-to-day life is like. And I guarantee you, ladies and gentlemen, many of our politicians never stick their noses outside of their offices. They never get off the bus, if you will, when they go on a junket. They get what's served to them. And they need to be a part of your community. If they're going to contribute, that's the question you ask them. So what are you going to do for my community? Or what are you going to do for our community? What do you bring to the table as a talent that will enhance life here in Hawaii and make it better? So you don't have to get out and rabble rouse. You don't have to maybe necessarily get out and wave a sign, which I sometimes, am I going to offend somebody? I think waving signs on the side of the highway is what is the trouble. It fries the brains of, yes, it has an influence on the thinking of our legislators. But you really need to ask them, what are you bringing to the table? What do you plan? Don't give me these lofty things. I'm going to get you 14 new lights at the tennis courts out there. What are you going to do to make my community better? What are you going to make it, how are you going to make it easier to survive here in Hawaii? It's got to be on your agenda, as far as an elected official, to make this place survivable. Because right now, it's not. I see so many of our, not just the poor families, but many middle-income families struggling to make ends meet. And sometimes these legislators, and you ask that question, do it in the name of motherhood, apple pie, and the Chevrolet. You know, and I don't know if you heard it this morning on the radio. You do know that we pay a surcharge on every barrel of petroleum products we import to the state, $1.05. Well, this committee this morning announced they got this grand idea. They want to raise it another $2, $2.05. And when the dollar issue came up originally, two sessions ago, a certain legislator said to me, and we were testifying against it, we just said, you know, why do we need to do this right now, especially with petroleum prices so high, and they are affecting our community, they're affecting the cost of living here. Well, you don't get it. Don't you understand that we need to wean ourselves off of fossil fuels? And I said, yeah, but if I can't survive because I can't afford the fuel, what good is it for me? I'm going to have to move someplace else because I can't afford to live here. Well, don't you understand we need to be energy independent? I said, I understand that, but I don't think we need to have a penalty. And that's what it amounts to, a penalty. And he says, I'm committed to energy independence and, you know, clean fuels. I said, okay. But, you know, you can't promise me and you can't guarantee me that money's going for that. And sure enough, at the end of that session, they took the majority of the taxes collected and put it into the general fund. Didn't go to energy independence, didn't go into energy research. It was just another smoke and mirror to raise additional taxes for the state budget. So now comes a second coming, and now they say, well, we need another $1. It's only another $1. Well, yeah, against 53 gallons in a barrel of fuel, seems like it. But each penny will ripple through the economy and ripple through your grocery bill. And that's what's going to happen. We are certainly energy dependent on fossil fuels at this point, but I don't think we need to have government take even more out of our pockets without first looking at the resources they have.
Well,
It's a matter of setting priorities. Yeah.
I'd like to give an opportunity for
I'm
questions
sorry.
now. No, you're good. It's all good, but let's, anybody, any question on any subject?
I'm talking about the politician that was devoted to getting ourselves off of fossil fuels. But yet we're sitting on the largest source of energy in the world over here. We're not using it. Geothermal.
Well, geothermal, we have ocean zone.
Whatever. If they were truly
And I hate
committed
to
to getting
tell
off
you,
of
but
fossil fuels.
I think it was your representative.
They did what now?
Huh?
My representative
He was
did
giving
what?
this lecture about energy independence.
Oh,
Hold on.
okay. Really?
That's right, you're from South Point, right? I mean, South Point to me is a long distance to travel. I really
Hour and
appreciate it.
15 minutes.
In the back there, David.
I'm sorry.
Well, great presentation. 3 observations. Number one, how do we move this train forward? Looks to me like the gravy train's about ready to run off the track. That's number one observation. And maybe consultants, people like you, can comment on that, to the legislature for what it's worth, can get behind candidates to tell people the truth. Okay, we're not getting the truth. Number two, I was involved in a number of the campaigns, as many of us were here back last year. Unfortunately, we didn't prevail. We got run over by the unions. So my observation from that experience is, how do we make the unions less relevant? How do we make small business employment more relevant? Hiring 3, 4, 5 people. And number three, how do we field candidates who will stand up and take on the issue? Well, we've developed this concept of LIFE, L-L-I-F-E, in the Republican Party, and really carry the banner forward, representing those of us who are a little more conservative in our way, those of us who are employers, those of us who have everything we have invested in business. How do we field these candidates that have this experience that you're talking about? How would you find them to carry the banner forward? Because I'll tell you, quite frankly, I'm not seeing a whole lot of exciting candidates coming out of this next crop of people. I mean, we really took a hit. A lot of us are still coming out of the funk from last year. So do you have any political insights as well as economic insights as to how we might put this whole package together and field candidates that can carry our conservative message forward to our constituents?
Methinks you give too much credit to the unions. And certainly the unions are a very large 800-pound gorilla. But when you think about it, the majority of the jobs in this community are in small business. It's just that you don't have a single label. You don't have IBEW, you don't have AFL-CIO, you don't have HGA, which everybody can identify with, so you need to find a common marquee, I guess is a good word. We are small businesses, we are employees of small businesses, we're fighting for our lives. It's because you're not seen as a force, because you're individual, you're the brew pub down here or the burger place up the street. But you're all small businesses. You also have employees who realize they're working for a small business. And unless they identify with a single marquee, we are Small Business Kona, we are Small Business United, regardless of you're Republican or Democrat. These are the principles we believe in as a small business community. I don't think you'll be able to challenge the unions. You know, the unions, you've got a label. You better vote this way because this is your label. If you're a small business, why can't you ask your employees the same thing? We're fighting for your jobs, first of all. I think that, you know, unions can be formidable. Unions hate my guts, I tell you. But they also acknowledge that had they listened to me 20 years ago, we wouldn't be in this situation. And so they kind of, yeah. You know, I had the chairman of OHA single me out yesterday. Well, even though we've never agreed on many things before, you're right. I go, okay.
Big difference, huh?
Big difference. You know, Colette and I have known each other for 25 years.
How many people are in Kona Kohala Chamber of Commerce here? Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. I mean, that's one possible vehicle. Now, they don't get political
That's
per
the
se,
problem.
but you can have
You can have a spin-off.
informal hui
You can say businesses
of our own.
for Kohala, businesses
I mean, just
united.
for so that, of those, each of you that are in Kona Kohala got an invitation from me, correct? With my name on it. You know, I sent it because if you have an email address, at least I did. I did that as Ross Engineering to invite you to come, right? So we've got to build that group. That's, you know, the ones that want to come and work. The ones that don't, that's fine, I think.
Okay, the second part of that question is how do you feel candidates? First, you have to have an organized body. You have to have a body of people that says, we believe in something and we're looking for a candidate. You know, too often you have candidates that, you know, I really would like to run, and then they go out and they gotta go form a committee. Can you come and help me? And can you come and help me? And whereas if you're going the other way around and say, we're the Kohala, the Kona Kohala small business, whatever. We are willing to support you and work for you. Oh my God, as a candidate, I'd be thrilled because part of my job has already been done for me, is to organize people who are of like mind. And too often we find candidates that are brave enough to step forward, but they have no background. I mean, they have no support. They have no organized community behind them. You should be out there and say, we want to interview people who are running for the representative district of North Kohala. If you would like our endorsement, come and interview with us. In return, we will promise you X number of resources. It doesn't have to be necessarily money. It can be people out waving signs. Why would you do that? But yeah, you get people out waving signs. You get them going door to door. These independent candidates who don't come with a union backing are out there by themselves. And I'm speaking to the choir here. You're out there by yourself, right? It's hard. It's really hard. The other thing I think, you know, I won't comment on recent leadership, but back when Jane Tatuwet was the Republican Party chair, I admired her because what she did empowered the candidates that ran as Republicans by training them. You know, and I won't be egotistical, but they've got to be articulate. They got to be able to get up and debate. They got to get up and present. They got to get up and talk about government and the issues as eloquently as an incumbent. Not that necessarily incumbents are eloquent, but they have more information because they've been in office. So you need to also put together a system or an infrastructure that will provide candidates with the tools they need to be successful. That is, you know, if it needs to be public speaking skills, if it needs to be information about county government or state government, issues about education, issues about social welfare. There's a whole bunch of things out there that they can be advocates for. I was just telling Dave on the way from the airport, Deputy of Human Services I saw the other day of this meeting comes up to me and he says, I saw your name on the long-term care task force. I didn't know you. I said, well, I've been doing this for 20 years. I can tell you all about long-term care, and everything that we predicted 20 years, 25 years ago has come true, which is basically, I don't know, I know people have been here 14, 15. Anybody here been here for more than 15, 20 years? Yeah. Okay. You know about the efforts of the state to set up a long-term care insurance program. I think it was called Family Home or something like that. And what it was going to do was going to go out and tax you $10 a month if you went and put money in the pot, and you would be guaranteed long-term care benefits when you needed it. I sat on that task force and I said, you can raise all the money in the world, you can have billions of dollars in this fund, but if you don't have the services you need, then that insurance money is not going to be any good. What are you going to buy? And the first thing we said is you need to begin to build the infrastructure for long-term care, from assisted living to intensive care to retirement communities. The baby boomer generation will age in 20 years, and they may have that insurance, but if there's no caretaker, what good is it going to do? And sure enough, we're seeing that shift now. Community colleges are beginning to create curriculums for long-term care providers. We're beginning to see a lot of retirement communities being built with all ranges of care, from independent living all the way up to assisted care and intensive care. But, your candidates need to look at some of these issues, and whatever their liking is, they become advocates, but they need to be well-informed, and they need to be articulate. They need to attract voters. That's what it comes down to. And it's not just because they're non-union supported. They're supported by people like you, people who want to change the direction the ship is state. And it's going to take a lot of people to turn that. I try to liken it to our situation right now is that our state is like the Pirates of the Caribbean without Sparrow at the helm. Would be nice to have Jack Sparrow at the helm and Johnny Depp, but we don't got that anymore. It's not in the cards, at least for the near future. But if you really want to make change, remember you can't just let these people who have an inkling that they may want to run stand there by themselves, because that's not going to get them elected. You're working against a candidate who has 300 HEA members who are going to turn out for stew and rice. You're going to have a candidate who has the IBEW out there holding signs on Kootenai Highway. The guy who doesn't have that kind of support, i.e. the non-union candidate, really needs a demonstration that you can organize some support for them. And if you really believe that you need to have candidates in there who have life experience, let's start with that, let alone business experience, then you really need to support them. Physically, monetarily, financially, whatever. It's lonely, right?
Any other questions?
Well, I hope I didn't depress everybody. Every time I do a talk, we were depressed. No, I hope you feel energized and feel like we really need to work together to do something else.
For a lot of us that get emails from our esteemed governor, today they were proud to announce that they're repaying the Hurricane and Rainy Day Fund with more borrowed money. It's like us borrowing, getting a home equity loan to pay off our credit cards. I don't know that that's anything to write home about.
Yeah, I meant to address that. That if you read the press release and you read some of the coverage by the media, it sounds like a wonderful thing that we are going out to issue 1.287 billion, and we're going to recapitalize the hurricane fund and the rainy day fund. And so I called my stockbroker this morning because I figured I'm biased, I'm jaded, and I should get an investor's point of view to look. It's a shell game, right? It was cash in the hurricane fund. It was cash in the rainy day fund. Okay, so we took money out of there to pay for operating programs, cash. And now we're going to recapitalize these funds with the proceeds of borrowed money. So skip the funds and just say we borrowed money to pay for operations, which is a no-no. You just don't, you don't put your electric bill on your credit card. And that's what it amounts to. And I don't know how many of you, most of you are probably already beneficiaries of the system. But the scary thing about what I'm hearing from the president is to continue the payroll tax holiday because it will put money back in the hands of consumers and they'll go out and spend. He's just delaying the day of Armageddon.
Yes.
We know that Social Security is already going to go belly up unless we do something. And now he's turning off the spigot a little bit so the money doesn't flow into the fund for a payroll tax holiday. And since, well, you're still in business, it doesn't benefit the employer. It's only the employee share.
Mm-hmm.
The employer continues to pay in the 6.2%. The 2% reduction is out of the employee. So it looks really good because now the employee says, I got money. But what happens in the future when that employee retires? The money's not going to be there to pay the benefits. So talk about a shell game. The president's playing a shell game. The theoretical is you use borrowed money for long-term capital projects because it's anticipated that that building is going to benefit not only me today, but my children 10 years or 20 years from now, and their children 40 years from now. So we will all end up paying for the building because we're also beneficiaries. That's why you try not to use cash for things, buildings, facilities. Because if you use cash, then you're putting a bigger burden on today's taxpayers for taxpayers in the future who will then have no responsibility for this building. The caveat is where you overexpend capital, borrowed money beyond the means of the next generation to carry the debt is where you get in trouble. And that's what we've basically done, is we haven't managed our facilities very well. This past session I got through, it's a miracle if a bill gets through in one session, is the recommendation that we sell off our public facilities. And you're like, what? You're giving away the crown jewels? No. It's the point of the matter is that government is also a poor manager of facilities because you have to go through the appropriation process. In public sector, you don't put reserves aside. As you need the money, you go and say, can you give me $3 million because I have to paint this building? That's their problem. So the result is, because it takes so long to get the appropriation, the paint begins to peel and come off before we ever get the money to paint it. And by then it's too late, and now you've got to not only prime it, you've got to sand it, it's costs even more. So the bill would allow the state government to sell off the physical facility while maintaining the land underneath as public lands, because then you can always control the use of that building. But it would put the renovation and maintenance into private sector, into private hands, which is probably more able to respond to the needs as they develop. Okay, I have a couple of buildings, affordable housing. We put so much aside into our deferred maintenance fund. We put so much into a residual receipts fund. These are monies that are built up over a period of time, so when we get to a major renovation, repair, whatever, the plumbing, the electrical, we have the money. Yes, I would like to keep my rents low because my tenants are low income, but they also have to be participants in maintaining the building. In public sector, that doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. It's always on a cash basis. Well, we need money. Well, now it's going to take 18 months. This building I have is a partnership. It's a condominium. Half of it is owned by the city. The nonprofit I chair owns the residential. The city owns the parking lot and commercial. I was ready to paint my building 7 years after we built it. Right at the time, the market was going like this. And instead of it costing me $1 million, which we thought it was going to cost, it cost me $700,000. Fill in this paint job. You know, you can paint your half. They didn't have the money. It took them another 18 months to get the money appropriated, and by then the market was going back up. You lost that opportunity. And that's why we think that government just can't manage it. They don't have the ability to turn on a dime, and therefore we should turn the maintenance and operation of our public facilities over to the private sector.
Is there support for that?
We got the bill through. Whether or not it gets executed, I don't know.
I mean, it got voted through. I mean,
It got signed into law. It almost didn't get signed into law, and then we sent somebody up there to talk to the governor's people.
Thanks for a little good news.
Yeah.
A little bit.
So we also started that 2 years ago with public housing. It's to sell off our public housing facilities, not the land, into private sector so that it can be better maintained.
I'd like to know when you can run for.
I think we have a resource here.
I think I'm in a better position not being in office. I think we can say things that an elected official, I won't say politician, an elected official probably couldn't say because in order to get legislation passed, they've got to play the game. And I don't play the game.
Thank you.
Well, let's give them all a hand.
One of the most important things we talked about this evening, you know, so many of the audience raised the issue of politics and the political atmosphere, and really when it comes down to is the fact that we're all part of the community, and that being a part of the community means not only that we take from the community, but we also contribute. And contributing your expertise as far as knowing the problems of your community and getting elected officials to react as well to the issues at hand is really critical. And the only way you're going to make change and change the direction of our ship of state is if you become personally involved and you become informed about the issues facing our community today. Because unless you are, then you will be resigned to accepting what the elected officials that are currently in office are going to tell you. And that is not necessarily what the true picture is. So one, to be informed; two, to be active in supporting and working for improvement in your community is what we're here about tonight. And certainly the financial situation is the most critical issue at this point, not only for our state and county, but also for our federal government. And unless you are involved as a taxpayer and realizing that you're paying for this government that is regulating you, then you have no reason to complain if you don't get involved. So if nothing else, please remember that it's important for all of us to be involved in our state and county government, to be aware of the finances and how they're using your tax dollar, because when it comes down to the bottom line, it's a make or break situation, and unless we change the direction of the ship of state, we will all end up probably sailing over the edge of the earth.